make no doubt about it, it is data driven when we're here in the oil and gas industry. And it's always great to have a little energy insight. And as we continue this year's sharing time with service companies, we're going to look at a financial guru today that really looks into that data in this energy focused world we live in. We'll talk about that and much more on this episode of The Crude Truth.
In 1901, at Spindletop Hill near Beaumont, the future of Texas changed dramatically as, like a fountain of fortune, thousands of barrels of oil burst from the earth towards the sky. Soon, Detroit would be cranking out Model Ts by the millions, and America was on the move, thanks to the black gold being produced in Texas. Now, more than a century later, the vehicles are different, but nothing else has truly changed. Sure, there may be many other alternative energy sources like wind and solar and electric. But let's be honest, America depends on oil and entrepreneurs, and if the USA is truly going to be independent, it has to know the crude truth.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave nothing but 5-star reviews. Thank you very much for whatever time of the day or night it is that you're listening to The Crude Truth. Here we are again for another great episode. I'm just so excited. As I said in my teaser, this year, as you know, I'm highlighting service companies where I can this year, because without them, operators like me would not be where we are. And as many of my listeners have probably heard me say, I always think of service companies as people that get paid first. Why? Because I don't drill a well unless I have the money to drill a well all the way through completion, and I can pay a man that day to get the job done. That being said, most people don't pay their service companies for 30, 45, 60, even 90 days. And I just can't believe that. And that's not good business. Today, now that I've been just talking your ear off, I have an excellent guest, a financial guru. Once again, I bring on a doctor. Today, I bring on a PhD man himself from Houston, Dr. Jeff Krimmel. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing great, RT. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, no. Thank you so much for coming on to The Crude Truth. I know I reached out to you about a month ago, and I was like, you know what? I've got to at least ask you to come on. And I can't believe, during our pre-production meeting, we were talking that not everybody has even gotten to you. I mean, what you're doing on LinkedIn right now, your financial analysis from transporting companies, natural gas companies, from service companies, and how you're just putting it out there for people to understand is just, lack of better words, huge. And it's awesome to watch and read these documents to go, it makes no sense why people are investing in oil and gas, because they're making money. Now, some of them in the natural gas, maybe not quite as much with operational expense the way it is, but let's talk about that. But first, let's talk about you, Jeff. Jeff, you're in Houston. You are a financial guru. You are the chief strategy officer at Pinnacle, but yet, for all my listeners out there, once again, got a guy, got the hair flowing. Looks like he's riding mountain bikes half the day, every day. Jeff, who are you?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. My background is all in mechanical engineering. I have a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD, all in mechanical engineering. And like I mentioned to you a few minutes ago, I had, when I was building this idea of what my career trajectory would look like, I had no idea that oil and gas was going to be in my future. And long story short, I wound up with my first role out of graduate school was a research and development engineering role at Baker Hughes. And so I ended up spending about 8 years over at Baker Hughes in the oilfield service side, doing a whole bunch of different things from R&D, and then quickly got into some data-driven pricing and profitability work, and got into some strategic market intelligence work. And that sort of formed the background for what I have done since then. So I went over to Key Energy Services and did some more pricing work, did some more strategic market intelligence work. And now I'm at Pinnacle, where I'm the chief strategy officer. And again, most of the work that I do here is focused at the market, trying to understand what customers spend. We do industrial reliability services. So we work with, say, petroleum refiners and petrochemical operators and midstream operators, upstream operators, to improve their equipment reliability. So we use a lot of data to help them build up optimized inspection and maintenance plans for their equipment. So I look at the market to understand what are these operators spending on all things industrial reliability, and what would the value of reliability improvement be like for these operators. That's what I spend most of my time working on today.
Most of your time, that's probably all of your time. I mean, with how much thorough and thought you put into these just these financial statements or these essays, or I don't know what you want to, exactly what you want to call them, or how you want to title them. But you just put so much into them, and you're just really able to share so much. What a way to come out of graduate school and be at Baker Hughes for 8 years. I can't imagine that R&D. I immediately go back to that movie, The Aviator, starring DiCaprio, where he was Howard Hughes, and just on the plane side of it, or aerodynamics, how he did so much. But I don't know how many of my listeners or people even out there know that Hughes, and it was his father that created the modern day drill bit. And so that's where his millions of dollars really came from, that he could go do everything else. So anyway, Baker Hughes is just such a leader in innovation itself on that side of things. To have you there and then go do that at Key Services and now Pinnacle. Wow, what a journey you've been on so far.
It was phenomenal. I mean, my career would look nothing like it does today if I had not spent those 8 years over at Baker Hughes. It's the scale of their operations, like you said, the extent to which innovation is embedded, and how the company performs and operates, and then the kinds of people that find themselves over there that are doing such good work, and that I was able to learn from. I had to bore you with this transition, but like I said, my background's all in engineering, so
yeah,
all this corporate finance stuff that I've picked up has been self-taught as I've gone, and I've been fortunate to be adjacent to some really high-profile business leaders that have an enormous amount of acumen. So a place like Baker Hughes is a good spot to be when you're trying to build up a career, to develop that experience and build that network and get those connections going. And it's definitely helped fuel me to where I find myself right now.
And you find yourself in Houston, correct?
That's right.
How long have you been there?
So I was born and raised in Houston. I came back to Houston. So I defended my PhD thesis in March of 2010. So I moved back in June of 2010 to take the job at Baker Hughes. I have been in Houston since, minus 1 year. When I was with Baker Hughes, I moved up to Denver to do a data-driven pricing and profitability project up there for a year. So for 2014, and then when oil prices crashed at the end of 2014, came back to Houston to pick up the strategic market intelligence stuff.
Okay, wow. And then now at Pinnacle, you're the chief strategy officer. And what are you doing over there at Pinnacle these days?
Yeah, it's a lot of understanding from the market. What does the demand look like for industrial reliability services? What are the spend levels look like across these various target industry sectors that we work for? And it gets really interesting because industrial reliability, as you'd imagine, is not at all sexy, but it's incredibly important. And so it can struggle to compete for capital inside of these operating units. And so we try to help our customers understand what is the return on investing in reliability improvement. Of course, there's largely some safety gains that you get from that. So those are incredibly important, and everyone values those immediately. And then we try to layer in some of what are the financial and operational wins that you can harvest by investing deliberately in reliability, not necessarily aggressively. You're going to plow a ton of capital into that space, but it's an underexplored space where data plays a huge role. And that's how we position ourselves in trying to help customers with what we do.
Wow. What you guys are doing, I mean, y'all are doing some great forecasting. And, I know some of the other stuff you've been able to do is you basically analyze the performance of some of the world's biggest businesses and the financial markets. One of those deals also is that you went in just here recently and looked at natural gas, and you looked at several of the large natural gas producers. And, I'd like to kind of talk about some of your findings there that you were able to find.
Yes. And as a kind of a segue into this, I'll say, the LinkedIn stuff that I've been sharing, I got serious about my LinkedIn participation almost exactly a year ago. And since Tuesday, July 5th of 2022, I've literally published a note every single day on LinkedIn. So it's weekends or weekdays, Christmas Day, New Year's Day, all the rest. And so it's what it's done. I do that for a bunch of different reasons, but one important one is it forces me to focus on the kinds of things I'd be reading and studying and analyzing anyway. But now I'm trying to package that in a way where I can share a lot of it publicly, and that's what compelled me to steer down this natural gas route that you had just mentioned. So with natural gas prices having been as volatile as they've been, having recovered aggressively through 2021 and into 2022, and now dropping back down, being around the $2 per million BTU range. That sort of turbulence always, I always find that very interesting. And when I was at Baker Hughes toward the tail end of my time there, some of the market intelligence work I was doing was building up an understanding of what different operators' hedge positions look like. The hedge side of the equation can get pretty complex because there's just so many different financial instruments that these operators use, and they use these instruments in different ways and set floors and ceilings at different levels. And so it takes a little bit of work to pull all that stuff apart and put it back together. So I had remembered all that work that I was doing at Baker Hughes, seeing what gas prices are doing today. I was like, okay, what I want to do as sort of a first step was to understand for these gas targeted operators, what do their break-even gas prices look like? And I set up two different metrics that I was looking at. So one was just if you're trying to break even on a cash basis, right? So you'll have some non-cash charges for the exploration that you've done in the past, for the well development that you've done in the past. Put all this aside, and we're just, the only thing we care about is ongoing cash costs. What does the gas price need to be in order for a lot of these operators to break even on a cash basis? Then I also looked at, okay, now let's include those non-cash charges. And if they're trying to generate a full operating profit, what does the gas price level need to be? And I have the list here. I looked at a handful of operators: Chesapeake, Southwestern, EQT, Antero, Range, Comstock, Gulfport, and saw how those break-even prices trended since the beginning of 2021.
Yeah, I know. And, it kind of blew me away because, after your findings, because that, everybody really kind of broke even still, even at the $2 mark, if I'm correct. And now some were a little bit less, a little bit more. In fact, I think two of them were significantly below $2, if I was correct.
Yeah, when you get to, say, on the cash basis, the two lowest were Gulfport and Comstock, and those did come in. And actually, those on the cash basis came in even less than $1 per million BTU. And then Antero, Range, EQT come in this $1 to $2 range. But even if you want to fully burden it and get to an operating profit level, where again you're including these depletion and amortization charges, Gulfport and Comstock still come in with break-evens less than $2 per million BTU. So it's not like at today's levels that there's just this ongoing bloodbath across the space. There are operators that either through operational efficiencies or having targeted, really attractive rock, that they are able to produce profitably even at today's price levels.
Yeah. And, when you talk about today's price levels, I am somebody that thinks we're back at the normal price for right now of natural gas. I'm already hearing some people, as an operator and as a producer, sometimes I get people that, say, hey, I've got a new project. Would you like to join us? And they're like, well, when we get back to $6, and I'm like, it was there just because in my opinion, it's like, we thought the financial market was going to shoot up, I think we shot up so high because we thought the winter was going to be a lot worse than what it was here. And we thought that the winter in Germany was going to be a lot worse. And it turned out it wasn't. So those speculation prices shot up. And now, here we are back down to 2. Is that correct?
That was largely my read. Mild weather, right? That seasonality worked to the disadvantage of natural gas producers in that sense. Uh-huh. And then you get to this associated gas game where with oil prices at this level, the liquids focused operators are performing in a very healthy way. And so with all that oil production comes a considerable amount of gas production. And so like you said, there's a lot of sort of headwinds against this idea that the gas prices should move really aggressively upward from here.
Yeah, I don't see it happening. I do think natural gas is going to be even bigger here in the next 5 years. Hopefully, I think if they're serious about and I'm going to use quotations, an energy transition, natural gas is the perfect, vehicle to do this because the CO2, the emissions on it won't be as bad. I mean, we're already using it in public transportation here in Fort Worth, Texas, as compressed natural gas. And some other places are using it as liquid natural gas. So I think it's a great way to do more. And hey, if somebody wanted to bet now on a long term, do a T. Boone Pickens type of thing, hey, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just the question is, when will it really shoot back up? And I'm not even going to ask you that question because I have no idea. And I don't think you probably do either on when we'll see higher weighted natural gas again, you know?
No, and it's funny that you asked that question because it's such a tantalizing question. Everyone wants to know. Everyone asks it. I think people playfully try to respond to it, and the answer fundamentally is just unknowable. I mean, it's just that's the way that the markets, in a sense, have priced in all the knowledge that collectively we have. So if you feel like you have a strong conviction that the market doesn't share, then that's a real opportunity for you. I am where you are, though, that with these new massive LNG project approvals that we're getting. And this idea that the world, increasingly the free world is very much under this, I think, correct impression that you really need to think very hard around how you source energy and getting it either domestically or getting it from places that you trust, where economics and the rule of law and such allow energy resources to come to market when the market requires them. And so, with these LNG approvals and stuff, there's a lot of reasons to be bullish on the idea that natural gas will play an increasingly important role as the energy infrastructure that we have evolves going forward. So I'm entirely with you there. Pinpointing that in time becomes so terribly difficult.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. Like Back to the Future Part 2, where he gets the book on the sports betting, and it's like, that's the only way you're going to be able to know when it comes.
That's exactly right.
Well, let's talk about this year on the CRUDE Truth. I'm doing my best to talk about to highlight service companies, and I'd mentioned in my teaser that hey, service companies are very important. You've also now gone in and done some financial data and some looking at several of the bigger service companies out there. Let's talk about what you found there, and maybe if something was interesting that caught your eye.
Yes, it's again, having worked at Baker Hughes and done the market intelligence stuff there that I had done, I am very used to combing through the earnings reports for Baker Hughes, for Halliburton, for Schlumberger. I remember listening to endless earnings calls. And then, in fact, that was the big sort of, it's how much of a nerd I am, but that was the big quarterly, sort of event that I got really excited about, was being able to sit and listen to all these earnings calls and listening to, these high caliber CEOs talk about their businesses and, answer questions from their bosses, from the analysts, about how they expect their business to perform. And it was always interesting to me to get a sense, okay, how are these folks thinking about all the different moving parts that impact how a business this big performs? So I have kept that interest with time. And like you said, I've dug through a lot of the Baker Hughes, Schlumberger, Halliburton, Weatherford reports, and my plan is to go forward, keep doing that every quarter. And just last week, we got new earnings results from Baker Hughes and from Schlumberger, or SLB now, and from Liberty. And so Liberty is a company I've recently started paying more attention to, in part because the marketing message around Liberty is an interesting message in terms of leaning into this notion of, how to innovate around the oil field to, be more efficient with emissions reductions, and, how to be more efficient on the energy consumption side for this high profile equipment that's out there doing a lot of hard work in the field. And so their messaging there is pretty interesting. And so, like last week, their CEO at the very top of their press release announcing their quarterly results talked about their return on capital employed, which can be a little bit of a nerdy financial metric, but something I pay a lot of attention to. And that one hit hard. A, I'm just interested in the financial metrics to begin with, but B, the fact that he would lead to the market with this idea of, hey, returns out of Liberty now are well above, of course, where they were coming out of the pandemic. And that comment is interesting. And then you can look at their trajectory, and sure enough, returns are very strong today for Liberty compared to even where they were in 18 and 19 leading into the pandemic. What gets really interesting is he had one of the statements in his press release around, now you're starting to see a normalization in a sense, where service sector returns are starting to rise and meet where the E&P sector returns are. And so now you have this nice, partnership here where both sides of the coin are able to generate returns at these kinds of price levels, at these kinds of activity levels. And so that's an incredibly healthy ecosystem to be a part of. And each of the service companies are starting to talk a little bit more about that reality now.
Well, I know that I'm a little worried because, the service companies did go up in the last 18 months on pricing. Now, they stayed very flat for the previous 3 years before this last 18 months. But, the moment we hit $100 oil, everybody went up. And now that we're back down to $80 oil, they're all still at those same prices. So I'm a little bit concerned about what's going to happen when we do, when we do hit $100 oil again. Are they going to jump back up? I've been on record now for 4 months, almost 5, that we're going to average $100 oil this year. we get to the end of May, we're not at 90. I'm gonna have to bring that one back. And that's one thing about having a podcast or doing an interview. It's out there. Somebody, I said it. I said it, and it is what it is.
Good for you though for having the courage to make that stuff public.
Yeah, and so. But anyway, so that to me, that did catch my eye on that, was that he goes, "Hey, we're back at a good level playing field," and I'm like, "Are we?" And this is from the EMP side. That okay, that article, another article came out that we spent 50% more as EMPs and operators last year out in the field, but yet we only got a 6% increase in oil production. Well, to me, that's because the pipe went up. Services did go up, man hours went up, the dollar went up. So, are we really at this place to where we're all cohesive? I'd like to think that maybe if we could go up in the price of oil just a little bit more, I think, and everybody still stays where they're at, then we could really see that more. But no, Liberty's doing something right. I know they're even trying to get into the electrical side of frac fleets, which I think you mentioned about the new technology. So I'd be really interested to see, are they saving money using these frac fleets out in the middle of nowhere?
That's a great question, and I've not studied that element of it much. I know that's the claim, right? Is that you get they're much less energy intense from a footprint perspective. So not only do you get some of the emissions advantages, but you also get an energy intensity advantage to deploying that kind of equipment. And then to your earlier comment about the sort of ongoing tension between the service side and the E&P side, I think you're exactly right that the nature of that tension has changed coming out of the pandemic relative to what it had been for certainly 5 years, maybe even closer to the better part of a decade. Coming out of 2014 with the price crash, things really changed around then, and so we're seeing a new reality now. And I think that one thing that will you had mentioned the continued price uplift on the commodity side, which would make a difference. I share your sentiment there. I would expect the oil prices to go up from here before they go meaningfully down from here. But you also have exactly what you mentioned about the cost for pipe and wage inflation and stuff. There were some supply chain disruptions that should normalize a bit going forward. So we shouldn't see the continued ramp in unit costs for the E&P side the way that we had. So we're at this point now where maybe the pinch is on and those folks are feeling it. My hope / expectation, that normalizes a bit as we get into the back half of the year. I say all this, and I'm in the same boat you are, right? A recession could land and just totally turn all this upside down from where I would expect it to go. And so with that caveat in mind, I can see things getting a bit more, favorable from here. But at the end of the day, there's so many dimensions to this, who knows?
And I'll just make one more quick statement on that, is that we're already conditioned for these prices, and I'll just use a Whataburger. That's gone up. I think a number 2 double meat has gone up, I think, almost $1 in the last 12 months. And I don't know if that's a good thing that I know that or not. But, the question is, will that price go down if some of this supply chain, or is it just going to be one of those, everybody's conditioned to it and leave them alone? That's what worries me.
Yeah. And in fact, if you force me to guess, I'm not sure about condition, but I would think, prices are very sticky, right? So once they've risen, it's really tough to drive them back down materially. Now, the second best thing, though, would be if they can at least plateau at this level for a while, right? If the rate of inflation comes back down and the rest of the economic landscape around those costs could lift up more favorably, then you get to this normalization that you were talking about. If you get the commodity price uplift and if you get the wages, that pressure to cool off just a bit, then you get to these expanded returns that I'm sure the E&P folks are hoping for going into the future.
That's what I'm hoping for. And but one thing, I wrote an article on a Saturday, about OPEC, about how they were about to meet and on Monday, and that, hey, we shouldn't see any reason why they're going to do anything. They're going to stay pat. Then what happened Sunday? They cut production. I was, well, I mean, what's happening about this? So, one thing my father says, all these things are normal in the oil industry. It keeps you on your toes.
That's right. It's that might be that there are many really fun parts of being attached to the industry. There's also very stressful parts of being attached to the industry. One of the most fun parts is, and I'm just wired in a way where I would so much rather be busy than bored. Being bored is just, nearly the worst outcome for me. And if you live anywhere near oil and gas, you do not have to worry about being bored.
Amen to that. Amen. Well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about natural gas for a minute, and let's talk about the future. Let's do it a little bit more. And okay, you and I both agree that we don't see the prices really shooting out there, but where do we see them, and where do we possibly see some of the need for natural gas here, maybe in the near 6 to 8, 12 months?
Yeah, I think what you had mentioned earlier about the weather patterns. Every indication, if you get any sort of reversion to the mean this winter season compared to last winter season, you'd expect a meaningful uptick in natural gas demand coming out of that. We also had some LNG outages earlier this year that if those work themselves through, then you get more demand, coming into the back half of the year than you had in the front half of the year. And then another data set that I pay a lot of attention to from the USEIA is I like to look at new power plants, which ones are coming online. You can get that information sort of month by month. And you see occasionally throughout the year just massive natural gas power plants coming online as we continue to execute this pivot away from coal toward natural gas. And so the demand profile around natural gas absolutely is improving. And if the E&P returns sort of stay, I mean, they're certainly healthier now than they have been, but if those just blow out on the top side, and you see this continued restraint around investment patterns, exactly what you said before about I think I did an analysis of the announced 2023 capex for a handful of E&P operators. I think the 15 biggest North American E&P operators. Yeah. And we saw something like they expected capex to increase nominally 22-23%, if I remember correctly, year over year. But they only expected aggregate production to rise 2%, if I remember correctly. So when you don't get these massive production moves on the upside, but you do see this demand wind catching you, then that would cause a price movement to happen. I don't see multiples. I don't, like you were joking about earlier. I mean, I don't see $6 gas right here in the near term future for us. But it's easy to see gas prices getting back into the $3.50, $4 type range. And when you look at the hedge positions for some of these natural gas operators, which is another bit of research I'm going to do here in the near future and start posting some of that. That's where you see a lot of protections kind of in this $3 to $3.50 per MCF type range. And so it wouldn't be shocking to see prices drift up toward that level in the not too distant future.
That hedging is something that I had an opportunity to have Tom Singh, a professor at TCU that talks about that, and T. Boone Pickens. I mentioned him earlier, just kind of joking around, but he was very good at that also. And that's something that's definitely caught my eye for the future at Pecos. I'm still not 100% on it, so I'm not even going to dabble just yet. Let's go to the oil side of things. And here we're sitting at today, while we're recording this episode, we're sitting at just under $80 oil still. And so where do you think you see us going with the price of oil, with everything that's going on from BRICS, the Saudi Arabia cutting production, from Russia with these sanctions continuing to produce more oil than they did when they started sanctions? Where do you see oil going?
Yeah, so I'm with you on being more bullish on the oil price side. We're so supply constrained there. Just given if you go back in time, the past 2, 3, 4 years and look at the investment trajectories that large, E&P operators have been on. There's not been an enormous amount of capital plowed into trying to bring tons of new production capacity online. And so you see the supply side being relatively constrained. And yet on the demand side, there continues to be this growth. Now that's where you get into, if there really is an impactful recession and it lingers for some period of time, then that'll start to weaken your demand argument. But there is economic growth ongoing, and there's increasing demand for the liquids side of the equation. And knowing the supply constraints around it, I would not be at all surprised to see $100 oil as you get into the summertime. And I hadn't thought about it. I don't know exactly what I would estimate, say, for a yearly average at this point. But whatever the market consensus is for that estimate, if you force me, as that's the over under, I have to take higher or lower. I'm more bullish on the oil price side than most, so I'm taking the higher side of whatever the consensus estimate is.
Okay, so if you're on the roulette table, you're taking those higher numbers, huh?
That's right. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, and this is just Jeff Krimmel, not Pinnacle, not anything else. Right now, with you being bullish on the oil, would you think that right now is a good time to be investing in the oil and gas energy space in some form or fashion?
Yeah, right. I mean, if you said that I had a certain amount of capital and I was forced to deploy it, where would I pull the trigger? The oil and gas side of the equation is incredibly attractive, and I haven't done another set of analysis that's coming up that I want to take a deeper look into is do some price to earnings and earnings yield type work, both on the E&P side and on the service side. You've seen a lot of recovery coming out of the pandemic, but I think there's still enormous valuation opportunities, largely across the fossil fuel side of the publicly traded company spectrum. Just the earnings capacity there is still very strong. Cash flows are still very strong. The investments have been very prudent and deliberate and targeted at highest return opportunities. A lot of these companies are handing material volumes of cash back to shareholders through share repurchases and through dividend payments. And so when you have management teams that are that laser focused around returns, and where there's this much uncertainty in terms of what future prospects look like in terms of how attractive organic investments in the business could wind up being, then they're more inclined. Tide goes to the runner, tide goes to handing capital back to shareholders. So knowing that's how these management companies are biased, and they're so laser focused around the return side, that sure seems like there must be some attractive investment opportunities on that side.
Man, I was having to write down some notes with what you were just talking about here, and about how cash flow is strong, and the capital deployment is laser focused. So I apologize. I was having to write down some notes there, Doctor.
No problem at all. It's everyone knows it's part of the industry. You have all these cycles, and this last trough through the pandemic was so low and so painful, and existed for a long enough period of time that when you combine that again with this the uncertainty around the future outlook for a lot of these businesses, that just demands so much focus around the capital allocation side of the equation. And with oil and gas management teams being as effective at running their businesses operationally as they are, when you add in that degree of focus and rigor in terms of how they're trying to decide how to deploy, how to allocate capital in this sort of environment, like I said, I mean, it really gets to there's some attractive opportunities. I haven't done enough of the due diligence to target specific opportunities to say, hey, I'm most excited about this particular one. But I'm pretty confident they're out there.
That is, well, you give me more confidence in what I'm doing, and I like to think that oil and gas is a great place to be, and we enjoy it. We're definitely laser focused for cash flow and those returns, because I don't make a dollar unless I'm producing oil, and so I do like that, and what you're talking about, Jeff. We're coming around the corner here on the end of the episode. And for all the people out there, and most importantly for David Blackman, Robert Bryce, Daniel Jurgen, Stuart Turley, for those guys to reach you, to have you on their show, because I can't believe you haven't been on with any of those guys, and yeah, I kind of threw them all under the bus, because I just can't believe that I've had the opportunity to talk to you today, and actually, more importantly, learn something. And that's, I think, the best gift that I get on this show is being able to learn from individuals like yourself. So thank you. Okay, how can people find you is what I was going to ask you until I got off on that.
No, well, thank you so much for those flattering comments. It means a lot to me. So yeah, the easiest way to get a hold of me is through LinkedIn, and I'm at Jeff Krimmel, Krimmel, and like I said, posting every single day. That's my plan going forward. And definitely now the streak is long enough that I really, really don't want to break it. So I'm there every day posting something. I try really hard to make probably 95% of what I do is data-driven observations around energy, and the 5% that's not data-driven is still energy-focused, but it's more heuristic or anecdote or something that we're hearing in the market that's I think is worth discussing more openly. I am always looking for interesting folks to connect with on LinkedIn, and in real life, of course, but LinkedIn is such an easy place to get in touch with folks. And to echo what you said earlier about I mentioned earlier, one of the best parts about being connected into energy broadly, into oil and gas specifically, is you're never bored. There's just always interesting stuff going on. It's not always it can be a little scary, a little crazy at times, but it's always interesting. A close competitor in terms of the best parts of being connected into all this is the people. There's just so many smart, curious, insightful people that and particularly people that have played this game for a long time, that have seen a lot of these ups and downs and seen the comings and goings. It's a phenomenal space if you consider yourself a learner, and you're just sort of addicted to this idea of being around new things and always challenging yourself. it's a great spot to be. So find me on LinkedIn, because I'm always looking for new folks to connect with and selfishly, learn a whole lot from.
Well, I know that me and Stu Turley and Dave Blackman, we keep talking that we need to, at some point, have some kind of a event, where we get individuals in, and you're going to be one of the ones at the top of the list. And I say, come on board and come talk, whether it's about natural gas, or maybe we talk about, maybe we look at some of these different companies on investing, or maybe we just do a big hedge analysis and talk about where we think natural gas is going to go. I'm already trying to think of a way and reasons there on why to have you back on. That was another reason why I'm taking notes here today on this episode. I've learned a bunch today on this episode. I cannot thank you enough, and I hope my listeners out there really enjoy it. In fact, I know they will. If they're, I can't thank them enough for even listening to me. And they're not listening to me. Who we kid? I have on the best guest, and Jeff, you've just once again been the best, and I thank you very, very much for coming on today onto the CRUDE Truth. Is there anything you want to say in closing today?
No, other than thanks so much for having me. I had an absolute blast. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to whenever the next time is.
Yes, no, let's do it again real soon, and I'll get this going. To everyone out there, again, please be sure to like, subscribe to the CRUDE Truth, leave some 5-star reviews, and please let Jeff know that you enjoyed listening to him today on the CRUDE Truth. We'll see you next time. Thank you as always.
This episode of the CRUDE Truth is brought to you by Oil and Gas Workers Association, Sandstone Group, Air Compressor Solutions, Basin Fluids and the Fuel Pros, and